Hi, I'm Rob B with Rob D, and in this video we're going to look at buy-to-let expat mortgages.
Yeah, there can be a few more barriers to getting a mortgage when you're an expat, but don't worry, in this video we're going to tell you everything you need to know. Let's start by looking at why expats have had such a hard time getting mortgages in the past. Well, one reason is that it's harder for lenders to pursue debt. They're also worried about money laundering. There are certain countries that are considered to be higher risk when it comes to money laundering and other types of financial crime. Therefore, if you live in one of those countries, it's going to be a higher risk for them, and there's going to be more work for them to do to verify that everything's above board. And that theme of there being more work for the lender to do, that's one of the most important factors that have put them off dealing with expats. If they're dealing with someone in the UK, it's a lot more straightforward to gather all the documentation together, find out what they need, and check that everything's as it should be. If they're dealing with people abroad with documents that they're unfamiliar with, that might even be written in a different language, it's a lot more work for them. So historically, that's something that lenders have shied away from. But thankfully, because of the way that the mortgage market has evolved, that is now changing.
Now, it is not a level playing field for expats when it comes to mortgages. There are certain factors that will determine your options. First of which is the country you live in. The UAE, Hong Kong, Singapore, it's relatively easy. But riskier countries, it's going to be more difficult. Who you work for as well will also impact on your ability to get a mortgage. Global employers are easier, but it is possible to still get an expat mortgage if you're self-employed.
So what should you expect from the process of applying for a mortgage as an expat? Well, really, it's not that different. There might just be a few extra hoops for you to jump through. So, as anyone would, you're going to have to prove your income and you're going to have to show evidence of your employment. So that's why it's easier if you work for a global company, because there'll often be an office in the UK that the lender can write to, and all the documents will be available in English. Depending on your situation, that might be more difficult for you, but that's one set of documentation you'll have to put together. Now again, like anyone else would, you're going to have to prove who you are and get your ID verified. Normally that could be done by your solicitor, but because you're going to be doing it remotely, you're going to have to find a local solicitor to do that for you, and it's going to have to be somebody whose qualifications are acceptable to the lender. Some lenders might actually request that you go to the local British consulate to get your ID verified by them. So it might be a little bit harder, but essentially it's no different from what anyone else would have to do.
And because it is a bit harder, expect things to take longer because there are more checks, and also the time differences don't help either. The good news is, while it's a bit of effort, in most cases you won't have to come home to complete the mortgage. Lenders understand what they're getting themselves into when they work with expats. They realise that you may be on the other side of the world, so coming home shouldn't be needed.
So that's the process, but how do you decide which lender you actually want to borrow from? Well, the good news is, as we've hinted, there are more and more lenders who want your business. Because so many investors are now buying through limited companies, the share of the market available to people who want to lend to individuals is smaller. Therefore, they're working harder to attract groups who previously they weren't interested in, and expats are being a massive beneficiary of that. That does mean though that you'll need to do your research carefully to find the best option. The big global banks that expats have historically used because they were the only options out there often now are not the best. The best products out there are the ones from smaller lenders who you might not even have heard of but have just come into the expat market recently. That's why it's really important to work with a mortgage broker who's used to working with expats, because they'll have the knowledge of which lenders are going to be the best for you based on those factors we talked about earlier, like your location and your employer. So now you know it is possible to get a mortgage when you're an expat, and you've got a good idea of how to go about it. But if you'd like a bit of extra help, check out Property Hub Mortgages. There's a link in the description, and we work with expats all the time.
And make sure you stay on top of all things property by subscribing to this channel.